If you've been on the internet in any capacity in the last few years or so, you've probably at some point come across at least one video or article talking about something called the flow state. Sadly to me, it seems like the concept of flow state has been hijacked by the sort of hustle and grind culture and has been made out to be all about peak performance and 10xing your productivity. And if you're like me, you probably find that stuff really exhausting at this point. But as someone with ADHD, when I first heard about flow, I was really attracted to the idea of being able to have complete control over my focus. I think the reason interest in flow has exploded with popularity recently is that we live in an age where absolutely everything is trying to pull your attention at all times. And it's harder than ever for everyone, especially people who have a hard time managing their attention, to focus on the things that really matter. Our relationships, our jobs, even our hobbies and special interests. And while it's easy to, and you'd be right to point to our phones and social media and all that is what's creating an environment that's hostile to our attention, it's not always helpful to just be like, well, just don't have a phone or uninstall social media, because the reality is that these tools are also how we do our jobs and maintain our social relationships and all that. And so today I want to go on a deep dive into the idea of flow and how building a relationship with the flow state has helped me in my journey of understanding and coping with my ADHD, and how you might start to explore flow not just as a method of getting stuff done, but maybe even as a way of living a happier and healthier life as a whole. Now, my notes for this video can only be described as an ambitious mess. But if I were to try and dumb down this video just to make it more digestible, I feel like I'd be patronizing my fellow attention deficit individuals. So shout outs to all my homies listening to this while they play games or doing something else or are watching at 2x speed. You're just like me, for real, for real. And what to better pair with an ambitious mess where ADHD meets flow than a Sonic the Hedgehog game, right? When I was a kid, before I even knew I had ADHD, Sonic as a character was my role model for someone who has a hard time sitting still or staying in one place too long, but is still able to achieve great things and push himself to keep going no matter what. And then the games themselves are built around the idea of navigating obstacles and building a flow between point A and point B, especially Sonic 3 here, which has remained my favorite video game of all time since I was a kid. So I guess it would be good to start with a little of my background and my journey with ADHD. I'm 27 now, and I was only diagnosed about 2.5 years ago, so I spent most of my life kind of suspecting I was, you know, not like the other kids or whatever, but not really understanding what it was about my experience that was different from the experience of those around me. I figured out pretty early on that the better I did in school and the more well-behaved I was in general, the more freedom and time I was allowed to do whatever I wanted when I got home from school. And so that, combined with being lucky enough to always have really great teachers, meant that I was still successful in school despite my struggle to pay attention and self-regulate. What that usually meant was that I was playing a lot of video games. I had, you know, action figures and whatnot, and I would watch cartoons or whatever, but that stuff was honestly mostly there for when I was bored of playing video games. It's so easy to look back with the hindsight of knowing that I had ADHD and seeing that games were providing unmatched stimulation to a hyperactive brain that craved it nonstop. But at the time, when I was a kid with only kid problems and felt completely fulfilled by the worlds I would explore and the challenges I would overcome in video games, I was perfectly content. I was perfectly happy. When I got to college, I started playing Dungeons and Dragons and learning how to make music in FL Studio. And that's when I started to figure out something was up about how my brain worked. Even though for the first time I felt like I was taking classes about things I was actually interested in learning, I still found myself daydreaming in class about D&D. It was just as hard as it had ever been for me to open a textbook and study, and yet I could wrap my head around a 300-page D&D rulebook in an afternoon. I could sit down, open FL Studio, put on my headphones, and just play around with different instruments presets, and suddenly 6 hours would pass without me ever checking my phone or even using the bathroom. After I left college, I struggled in my day job and then finally got an ADHD diagnosis, and suddenly I started to put the pieces of the puzzle together. My mind craves and gravitates toward whatever can engage and keep my interest and attention the most, and I'm at my happiest and most myself whenever I'm fully engaged in the present moment. However, because my mind struggles to regulate its attention, it's much harder to align whatever's going to engage my attention and release the happy chemicals with whatever's going to actually contribute towards my goals in life. So when I started learning about this so-called flow state, son of a bitch. So when I started learning about this so-called flow state and how it sounded like I might actually be able to take this hyper-focus that's been hijacking my autonomy for as long as I can remember and hijack it to do and achieve whatever I wanted, it sounded too good to be true. but I knew I had to find out for myself. So while I'm still in the process of figuring it all out, I know that it's important to share my thoughts about it if it can possibly help more people like me. So now let's try and be specific and define what exactly flow and the flow state is and what it isn't. Flow is not the same thing as focus. Focusing takes energy. Specifically, focusing expends energy. When you take a test at school or you come home from a long day at work, you're exhausted. But when you beat the final boss in Dark Souls or win a big basketball tournament, you're pumped. You're on top of the world. Focusing is also an action you can take, whereas flow is more like a state that emerges under the right conditions. It's kind of like eating versus sleeping, right? Eating is something you can do. You make food, you chew it, you swallow, it's actionable. Sleep is more like something that happens. You can lay down, you can close your eyes, you can turn on a Sounds of the Rainforest CD or a 9-hour video essay about Skyrim, but sometimes you do those things and you fall asleep immediately, and sometimes you lay awake and toss and turn, and before you know it, you realize you now know 9 hours of useless Skyrim facts. Flow is exactly the same way. And just like sleep, some people have an easier time tapping into that state of mind, and some people have a harder time. But just like how we can buy a better mattress and exercise and get sunshine and all of those things that can help you sleep, there are things we can do outside of our flow time to help us cultivate the conditions that help lead to flow. The experience of actually being in a flow state feels a lot like being focused or having fun. But there's a few things I think make it distinct. First is a resistance to distractions. When we're trying to force ourselves to focus on something, we're vulnerable to the tiniest of distractions. When I would take those tests in school where you'd have to fill out the bubbles on a separate answer sheet, I would get distracted picturing staircases or whatever shapes and patterns the bubbles were making. And then I would have to, if it were a time test, I'd have to account for the time I knew I would spend daydreaming about that into how much time I would spend on each question. But then when I got home and I booted up Modern Warfare 2, you best bet I was fucking locked in. And I'm talking about the good Modern Warfare 2. You kids don't know. Another thing that sets flow apart is complete immersion in the present moment. You're not thinking about Hydrocity Zone. You're not thinking about Carnival Night Zone. You're fully immersed here in Marble Garden Zone. Even if you're like me, you don't really like Marble Garden Zone. For that same reason, flow can also cause time blindness. But if you're like me with ADHD, you probably have time blindness anyway. So that's not really a very good indicator. The big one I don't see people talk about enough is the loss of the sense of self. If your ego is activated, like if you're worried about whatever grade you're going to make on this test, or you're worried you're going to let your team down if you miss this shot, or you're worried nobody's going to watch this YouTube video. Hey, yo, why'd I write that? That's kind of fucked up. If you're thinking about yourself and how you fit into the situation, that's brain power that's not fully committed to the flow. Sonic played basketball one time, and somebody told him to be the ball, and he took that literally, and he made that his whole personality. And that's what I think makes flow feel so special, and why I think there's benefits to flow outside of the feeling of fun or whatever productivity it leads to. If you've seen that that pyramid of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, right? You'll know that there's material needs like food and sleep at the bottom. And then as you build up, you get social needs and relationships. And then at the top, you get self-actualization. I'm speaking more personally here based on my own understanding, not necessarily from a scientific study or whatever, but the flow state to me is to our self-actualization needs what sleep is to our physiological needs. And so ADHD can be to flow what insomnia is to sleep. I think you have to have this definition of flow for its own sake to explain why our brains seek out activities that immerse us into the activity itself, and to explain how our brains will make something fun and enjoyable out of something that isn't at all fun and enjoyable. When I think of people who go to the gym, right? There's really three kinds of people. The first is the people who are motivated to go to the gym. You mainly see these people in January, right? They've got their New Year's resolution or whatever. They're trying to lose weight. They're trying to turn their life around, and they fucking hate it there, right? Everyone starts there with exercise. It sucks. And the thing about motivation is whether you stick with it, whether you reach your goals or not, the motivation eventually fades. Then you either stop going to the gym or you become a member of one of the next two groups. The second group is people who are quote unquote disciplined, right? They might still hate going to the gym, but they've either built a habit or otherwise blocked the possibility of not going out of their mind. But the third group is people who have grown to absolutely love the gym. They appreciate the weight loss or the gains and the health benefits or whatever, but what's really happened is that they figured out the exact right regimen that balances the maximum amount of endorphins and stress relief and energy to how difficult and how much strain is put on their body. And now they look forward to going to the gym. They love the gym because they've now gone beyond exercising for the physiological reasons and are now exercising as a form of self-actualization. My fucking hypothesis then is that our brains developed a mechanism that not only experiences a sense of fun and pleasure from inherently rewarding activities, but also has some ability to create reward and therefore fun and pleasure in activities that are otherwise strenuous, difficult, and boring. And I think flow is that mechanism. Because when you think about it, every function of our brain evolved in some way because it provided some advantage for our population to survive and thrive. When humans first started to form communities, suddenly it made sense to specialize, right? We went from all being hunter-gatherers to suddenly now this guy is a farmer, and this woman makes clothes, and this dude is a blacksmith. And just like how the gym bros make way more gains than even the people who are disciplined to go to the gym every day, there was likely an advantage to communities where people were able to find self-actualization through their work and their contributions to their community. What's even more interesting to think about, though, is that there was probably an advantage of some sort to having a diverse attention span across the population of that community. People who could focus on doing one thing day in and day out likely became farmers, masons, smiths, etc. But people with a greater need for novelty and stimulation might have been hunters and explorers or couriers, maybe. We can even find evidence for the acknowledgement of people with hyperactive attention in an early medical system in India called Ayurveda. Shout out to all my Dr. K homies who know where I'm going with this. Now, Ayurveda, to my knowledge, is still practiced in some places and is still part of Indian culture, so I don't want to speak too much on it and risk getting something wrong or misrepresenting it. And this is definitely an oversimplification, but essentially Ayurveda recognizes three sort of distinct personality aspects called dosha. The three dosha are kapha, pitta, and vata. Kapha-dominated people are said to prefer stability and security and are most associated with earth. Pitta-dominated people are said to be passionate and focused, and they're associated with fire. Vata-dominated people are said to be free-spirited and hyperactive and are most associated with the wind. Sound like someone you know? I sometimes wonder, with how much my life and especially all of my jobs and interests only exist because of modern technology, how I would have survived a long time ago. But now I'm thinking maybe with how my ADHD manifests as an interest in a bunch of unrelated shit and an approximate knowledge of many things, that 1,000 years ago, I might have been someone who, I don't know, walked around my village or community every day and just helped people that needed help with whatever they needed help with, you know? Maybe one day I would have helped deliver messages. On the next, I might help old ladies cross the street, or maybe help a farmer get his cows back into the pen they escaped or something. Oh man, I'm just describing Jack from Jack and Daxter. Really, I'm just describing like quests in an adventure game. Well, shit, that's it, isn't it? 1,000 years ago, I wouldn't have played video games. I would have been a video game character. Huh. And that's where us attention deficit homies kind of got screwed. Because an industrial economy favors specialization, suddenly the inability to put your focus onto one specific thing becomes a distinct disadvantage. And then you fast forward to where we are today, and it's no wonder then that ADHD is becoming an increasing problem. As we get deeper into the information age, and as we live now in a world where everything and everyone around us is constantly fighting for our attention, it's getting to the point where even people who would otherwise consider themselves to be neurotypical are becoming more and more overwhelmed with social media, advertisements, and all of the ways that digital media is trying to stake their claim on our attention. Hell, as a YouTuber, I'm part of the problem. I also want to be clear that I'm not suggesting that we like go back to the way that things were or whatever. Well, there's something to be said about Sonic games having themes of nature versus industrialization on top of the ADHD allegory. It's also like a documented logical fallacy to appeal that things are good because they are natural, or that things are unnatural and therefore they are bad. It's literally called the appeal to nature fallacy. I also think the two things that lead to the most growth in a society are a diversity of ideas and access to a knowledge base that can be built upon. And I think the internet provides those two things at unprecedented levels in all of human history. Anyways, my point is that it's not as simple as just putting all of the blame on society, just like it's not helpful to put all the blame on the individual. We have to take as much control of our individual lives as possible so that we can then contribute to building a better society for ourselves and the next generation. What I'm trying to say is, modern problems require modern solutions. And so to finally bring this video back on track, the modern problem we're trying to solve is with the reality that it's becoming harder across the board for us as individuals to regulate our attention We have to figure out how to take back our ability to focus our minds and our energy into the things that really matter to us and that really bring us the feeling of fulfillment and satisfaction we need to live a full and healthy life. And my personal experience as someone with ADHD and as someone just trying to survive modern life is that learning how to tap into the same state of mind when I'm washing the dishes or in the gym or writing a script as when I'm playing my favorite video games is one of the most important things we can learn on our journey to that self-fulfillment. I know that we went for a little bit of a ride for a minute there, but I really wanted to make a strong argument for why I think flow is so worth advocating for in a time where even having conversations about focus and productivity can be so frustrating for people like me. So now that I've made as strong an argument as I can for why I found flow to be worth advocating for and worth changing so many systems in my life to try and cultivate, I feel like we can finally start to discuss what those changes have been and how they might differ from the methods that neurotypical people might have an easier time with. Now, the big theme in almost every aspect of cultivating flow is balance. Just like with sleep, some people prefer, a firm mattress with like 14 pillows. I gotta have a soft mattress with no more than exactly one pillow. The big thing to keep in mind is that a balance is unique and personal to you. What's balanced for me might be overstimulating for you. What's balanced for me might be too rigid for you. That's why everyone has different jobs and different hobbies that they gravitate towards, and why everyone has a different favorite video game. So the first aspect that requires balance for flow is your health. And I wanted to wait till we got to Sandhopolis to bring this one up because I want to go back to the pyramid of needs. So you really can't start achieving self-actualization if you don't have a foundation built lower down on the pyramid. For example, you're really not going to be able to get into a flow of things if you've got an empty stomach or if you've got a stomach ache from eating too much candy. Now, that's not to say you can't choose an activity that meets multiple needs at once. You can, of course, pursue self-actualization in your job, which provides the money needed to meet your basic needs. But you can also find fulfillment in things like growing your own food. My girlfriend recently started sewing her own clothes, and man, can she churn out like an entire dress in like a day if she gets into a flow of things. Mental health plays a massive part of this too. Negative emotions and things like depression and anxiety can activate your ego and take you out of the moment, which is why in sports, it's so necessary to maintain team morale, because a team that's worried about losing or getting in their heads about how they just botched the last play isn't able to stay engaged. The next aspect, and a big one that people neglect, is their environment. You'll obviously flow much better in a clean and organized space than a messy and chaotic one. Flow is all about feedback loops. Eliminating distractions helps us get into flow, and then flow makes us more resistant to distractions, and that feeds into itself to really build our momentum. How to get this far into a video like this without mentioning the word momentum? The biggest hack I don't see very often on this point is to pay attention to the kind of content you consume and what kind of mindset it puts you in. I noticed recently that if I'm spending my free time watching videos that are encouraging and inspiring, I'm more motivated to work. Whereas when I'm binging video essays about games I really like, it's hard to think about anything but video games. Because I love watching the true crime and disturbing iceberg YouTube channels as much as the next guy. But when I'm spending my free time going down those rabbit holes, I start to feel a lot more anxious and paranoid during my work hours, and it starts to affect my sleep. So I had to start consciously controlling what kind of content I was exposing myself to, especially on days and weeks where it was especially important that I get something done. Next is stimulation. And all my ADHD homies know that this is a big one. If you're understimulated, you get bored. And if you're overstimulated, you get overwhelmed. The problem is that it's hard to regulate how stimulating a given activity is. And our mind is always trying to pull us toward whatever it thinks is going to provide us the optimal level of stimulation in the moment. That's why stimulant medication is so immediately effective for people with ADHD. When I'm able to provide my brain with the right amount of stimulation, regardless of what task I'm trying to do, I'm suddenly free to pursue whatever it is that I want to do instead of being beholden to whatever is trying to demand my attention the most. If you don't have ADHD or stimulant meds aren't right for you for whatever reason, there's still a lot you can do to regulate your stimulation levels. I think the most common is putting on music of the right genre and volume level to meet whatever stimulation need you have. You can also use less drastic stimulants like caffeine to meet your stimulation needs, but you gotta be careful about stuff that builds dependence. So, I mean, I've even had friends that have to resort to cigarettes and nicotine to meet their stimulation needs. Did I mention that studies show that people with ADHD are more susceptible to addiction? This shit just keeps getting better. But now that we've unlocked hypersonic, we also have to touch on overstimulation. I don't have as much experience with overstimulation, but I do know that now that I'm on stimulant medication, I can't listen to music as much when I'm working. While it used to help me focus, now that I'm on the medication, I find it distracting. It can be counterintuitive to think of taking breaks as necessary when you're trying to get into a flow, but if you're in a really stimulating environment, like, I don't know, a daycare or like a 6th grade classroom, you probably need a few minutes in a quiet room every once in a while just to maintain that balance of stimulation, not to mention your sanity. I'd also like to take this time to talk about Magic Mind, who reached out during this video's development and invited me to take their 7-day challenge and partner up to sponsor this video. Magic Mind is a mental performance shot for focus, motivation, and productivity. I have to admit I was skeptical at first. That's why I was pleasantly surprised to see that evidence-based research is at the core of Magic Mind's mission, and that they specifically stated that their product was not intended to replace your daily coffee. And so, despite my initial hesitation, I decided to take them up on their challenge. By now, I've actually been taking Magic Mind every morning for about 2 weeks alongside my ADHD meds, and it's safe to say I'm pretty happy with the results. The vitamins and bit of caffeine have given me the extra boost of energy that I expected, but what surprised me most was their stress relief and sense of calm. I've had a lot of personal stuff going on lately that's made it really hard to get work done, and since I started taking Magic Mind, I found it a lot easier to take a deep breath, let some weight off my shoulders, and keep going. Magic Mind donates 5 cents for each bottle sold to mental health charities that help U.S. unhoused communities. They're 100% carbon neutral, and they offer a 100-day, 100% money-back guarantee. On top of all that, everyone I've talked to there has been incredibly transparent and encouraged me to be as authentic as possible with this sponsored segment. So if you want to give Magic Mind a shot, I'm happy to share that you can use the link in the description and code NEAT20 for up to 48% off the first 10 days of a new subscription or 20% off a one-time purchase. The next thing you need to balance to maintain flow is actually stress. Now, obviously, when we talk about stress, we're usually talking about the negative kind of stress, but just like how our muscles give out under too much weight, but grow when they're strained with just the right amount of weight, our brains have a certain stress level called mu stress that is prime for learning and performance. This is why students learn best when they are taught at the right pace, and why video games are most engaging when they're not too easy to be boring or too hard to be frustrating, but just the right difficulty to provide a challenge just outside of what you think you're capable of. With ADHD, I actually find how stressful or strenuous an activity is to be harder to control and get right than my stimulation level. I used to procrastinate cleaning my house partly because I would be so overwhelmed with how much there was to do. Then I started investing in really good cleaning supplies to make it easier and to introduce some novelty to the mix. The problem was then that cleaning became so easy that it was just too boring to want to do, and then I was back to waiting until things were getting so messy that cleaning would be a challenge again. So my go-to method is to challenge myself to continue to find ways to get things cleaner or to use less resources, like doing the dishes while using as little water as possible or something. That way, not only am I getting better at my chore activities and doing them more often, but I'm entering a state of flow when I do them, and so they become inherently more satisfying. And that leads me to the aspect of flow that I really don't see anyone talk about, and that's the balance of autonomy and structure. In order to access flow, you really have to have an activity that has very clear rules and expectations as to what your goal is. But you also have to have the space to make choices and decisions within those boundaries that have meaningful impact on the outcomes, and bonus points if that feedback is immediate. This is what truly makes sports and video games such an obvious method of engaging the brain in this way. I know how high Sonic jumps. I know what happens if I spin dash, but whether I use the insta shield, whether I use a spin dash, however I get through a level in a video game is up to me. Our brains have a hard time creating something out of nothing, but when you know what's expected of you, when you know what your goal is, and when your brain gets to decide what path to take to make that happen, your mind starts firing on all cylinders. The biggest hurdle here is creating clear structure where there is none. I can have a clear idea for a video, but if I stare at a blank Google Doc for more than about 5 seconds, it feels absolutely impossible to conceive of writing a script. That's why creating outlines is so important. For this video especially, I was gathering cool ideas and felt like I knew what I wanted to say for honestly like weeks without making any meaningful progress on it. And eventually I just had to start spitting ideas into bullet points in no particular order, and then when I had enough ideas, I was able to start grouping them together and connecting them between each other. Once I had spent almost an entire workday on just that part, I was able to sit down and write like over 6,000 words for this script in like 2 days. Also, yes, for those who have been wondering, I do essentially script these videos and play the games live during the recording. I'm actually not as awful at Sonic games as these videos would have you believe, and you guys have no trouble pointing out. It's just that I'm having to refer to my script and fucking like play out of the corner of my eye at the same time. And and sorry if I broke the illusion, you know, that this was all just like off the cuff or whatever, but I still think there's something more authentic and engaging about the game being played while I'm talking about these ideas. And so I think it's worth it to get that experience, even if it costs, if it comes at the cost of me not executing the script as well, or the gameplay as well, for that matter. And based on the comments a lot of you guys have left on the other videos, I think most of you agree. When I was a kid, me and my friends would come over and we would just play through. You know, one of my friends would come over, we'd play through Sly Cooper. Like we would just start up Sly Cooper and we would just play through it in one night, and we would just sit there and talk about life the whole time. And like that was some of the best time I spent with my friends as a kid. And I really wanted to kind of, you know, really get that feeling out of these videos. And I think we've been successful at that, even if it means scripting them and still kind of doing them in this weird haphazard way. But I think it's been worth it. Now, the most important thing to keep in mind is that just because something is grabbing your attention doesn't mean it's engaging your flow state or leading to satisfaction or self-actualization. Video games are a great way to engage the brain in all these sorts of ways, and I don't subscribe to the idea that games are always a waste of time and that the experience and satisfaction of gaming isn't meaningful in any way. I have so many meaningful memories thanks to video games and thanks to the friends I've made through gaming. With that being said, there comes a time when we aren't playing the game because it's fun and satisfying. We're playing it to pass the time, you know, to procrastinate or to get away from something else, to be avoidant. I've been guilty of this a lot recently. When we're doom scrolling Twitter or grinding away at a shitty job or gaming mindlessly for hours on end, we're not hitting a flow state and achieving self-satisfaction. We're going in circles. We feel like we're moving, but we're not getting anywhere. It's kind of funny that the script is actually kind of lining up with the game this well, you know? Just because you're spinning in place doesn't mean you don't have the potential to take off and get going. Much of what I've learned about Eastern philosophy lately has been about the idea of not just creating a state of flow in individual activities, but building these feedback loops we've talked about to maintain a state of flow in all aspects of life and be in a constant state of self-actualization. And while I don't know if that's, you know, realistically achievable for everybody, it's an idea I've been using as a sort of guiding principle for finding direction in life for the past year or so. And it's helped me learn some valuable lessons. The first is to be mindful of the path of least resistance. Our minds are built to find shortcuts, to conserve energy. It's so much easier to lay in bed and doom scroll than it is to do something meaningful with our time. It's okay to strive for efficiency, but we find more satisfaction when we are challenging ourselves just a little bit more than we think we can handle. The second lesson is don't get wrapped up in attachment to goals. Focusing your mind on winning and focusing your mind on doing your best are not the same thing. The fact that there are always factors outside of your control means that giving your best doesn't always achieve the outcome you're striving for. It's okay to have goals like 100,000 YouTube subscribers or whatever, but you can make the best videos ever and you still can't force 100,000 people to hit a big red button. And so it's better to focus not on whether you meet your goals, but whether you find meaning in the pursuit itself. And the third lesson is be careful with what I call dirty fuel. The easiest example I can think of is using procrastination as a crutch to give you the stress level you need to be really focused on a certain task. Y'all have seen the SpongeBob episode. I know you know what I'm talking about. I used to do this all the time as a kid with projects and homework. Negative emotions can be powerful motivators, but the long-term goal should be to break out of being beholden to your base level motivations so you can have the true freedom to make decisions for yourself, which is actually what we'll be talking about in the next video, which is going to take on Knuckles' half of this game. A big thank you to the Neat Club and to Magic Mind for making this video possible. And remember that you can check out Magic Mind in the link in the description and use code NEAT20 for a discount at checkout. If you stuck through this video and you like the ideas I have, chances are you'll like the other videos in this series where we talk all about life as we enjoy our favorite Sonic games. Click the video on screen to start the playlist, and thank you for watching.